Filipino.
Yeah.
She loves Filipino food, especially chicken noodles. So, Marge, thank you, good job. And she has many lolas. And, and actually, if I remember it correctly, one time she said that one of her wish was to personally see and touch and ride a Philippine jeepney.
I'm waiting for the moment.
Okay. She's also a special friend of Janine, and Janine was really excited for this day. Unfortunately, she did not come, but we offer the stop for her intentions and for her mom. So, brothers and sisters, please let's give a warm welcome to the vocation directress of the Daughters of Charity, Province of the West, Sister Lisa Lagura.
I even have a Filipino name, right? Lagura. I'm ready to go. Waiting for the excuse. Who's going to help me plug this in? There's perfect. Well, this is a super long cord. I hardly know how to act. Thank you all very much.
Do you need sound too?
I don't need sound. Okay. I just need. That's in case we're in a jam, right? So grown up like you. Well, good evening. Can you all hear me? Okay. Before I was a vocation director, I was a teacher. So I like to think I still have some teaching gifts, and that's one of them. Projecting. Is it okay, or would you prefer I use a mic, or am I okay?
You're okay.
Okay. If I wither, let me know. So I'm excited to hang out with the Singles for Christ because I have been hanging out with individual members from Singles for Christ for a lot of years, and a member of my community is part of the Singles for Christ. Well, she's not anymore because she's not single anymore. Sister Marie Rachel Cruz, but she was from Southern California. And I think, Mary Chris, have you met her? Where did you go, Mary Chris? Did you meet Sister Marie Rachel? Yeah, so she speaks a lot and wonderfully about the Singles for Christ. Another connection I have to a lot of my brothers and sisters who are originally from the Philippines or of Filipino descent is we have 1 million Daughters of Charity running around the Philippines, right? Many people have been educated by the Daughters of Charity there, especially, particularly in nursing school, but in secondary education. So, and we have a number of sisters from the Philippines in my community here in the province of the West. So, not that that's the only thing that unites us, but it's a wonderful thing. And I do hope, I really dream to ride in a jeepney someday. I keep seeing pictures of them. I can't wait to hang out the side. So I'm happy to be here with you to talk a little bit about consecrated life. I'm only going to talk a little because as Denise and Mary Chris came to visit me last week, we discovered that maybe the most effective thing is to share and have questions and dialogue about it. So I'm going to quickly go through a few things to lay some groundwork for a nice discussion. Okay? And then somebody's going to be the timekeeper and help me, right? So when the discussion's over, just go like that. Okay. A little bit about consecrated life. You know, this is the year for consecrated life. I can tell you already know because you saw the logo up there, right? And part of the benefit of having a year of consecration, remember a few years ago we had the year of faith?
Yeah.
And we all studied the documents of Vatican II. And a few years before that we had the year of the priest. Okay, I'm sorry, cameraman. I'm going to be all over you. So this year, the Pope declared the year of consecrated life. And anytime the Pope declares a year, he's asking us to study in a special way about that topic. So when we had the year of faith, it was the documents of Vatican II. When we had the year of priest, it was about priesthood, history of the priesthood, the tradition of the priesthood. And this year, we're going to talk about consecrated life. That crazy thing that some weird people do, like me. You all are consecrated already by the virtue of your baptism. You made your vows already of consecration. Your parents helped you make it, most of you. And any vows you take from here on out, whether they be the vows that you take in the sacrament of matrimony, or they be the vows that you take as a consecrated person, or private vows that you might take, are only an extension of those vows of your baptismal vows. It's really important to know that, because the word consecrated life is it's not exactly correct, because you're already consecrated. Everybody in this room is. But when the church refers to that term of consecrated life, they refer to people who take these special vows, these 3 vows which we're going to just touch on in a minute. So when the Pope said we're going to celebrate a year, he's a member of a consecrated life institute, which is why we think he was like, hey, let's celebrate. He wants us to have a renewal of our consecrated life, much like what happened after the Second Vatican Council, to celebrate the witness of members and communities, religious orders, and to invite people to think about being a priest, brother, or a sister. I'm going the wrong way. No, it's not. What? It's upside down. This is pretty good for being upside down. This is a very brief history. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It says right up there that consecrated life is characterized by these 3 vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. Just take one and pass it around. That would be great. I better take one just in case, right? Most of us, when we were growing up, did not dream of growing up to be poor, chaste, and obedient. Those are big, creepy words, by themselves. We don't have them in the context of a vowed life, in the context of grace. Those are crazy words, especially in the United States of America. Who's signing up for those 3 things? Not too many folks. Most of us can't wait to be on our own, to make enough money to do the things we want to do, and to get married and have a family. Now, I want to say one thing about the word chastity, and I know you all already know this, because you are singles for Christ, well-catechized people. But, chastity is also a little misunderstood. Religious people, consecrated people, live what we call celibate chastity. Right? That means that we don't commit to one single person. Everybody, including people who are married, are called to chastity. Chastity is when we live in an appropriate relationship with people. So if you're the person I'm relating to, I relate to you appropriately within the context and within the grace of God. So if you're not my spouse, I'm not going to relate to you like a spouse. That's what chastity is. Everybody's called to it all the time. When you're in marriage, you're supposed to be in a chaste relationship. That means you're appropriate between you and your spouse. You're not acting that way outside, right? This is appropriate. And that would also mean that within that context of marriage, even, chastity isn't reduced to people who have sex and people who don't. That would be reducing it to just, sexual activity. That's not what we intend to do, and that's not what the church intends. But we can be unchaste even with our partner, even with our spouse. By coveting or lusting after them, that makes our relationship unchaste. We're no longer chaste. It needs to be mutual, all that kind of stuff. We take a special vow of chastity, but meaning celibate chastity, not one person. Not just for one person. That's kind of a big deal. And it's kind of a crazy thing, I know. It's okay. I don't have to tell you this. Jesus said, follow me. Jesus called the apostles. He said, come on, let's get on this boat here. The first accounts of consecrated life happened very early in the church. Not even all the Gospels were written by this time. Right? The Gospel of John came about 90 AD. Even before that, people were living a little different. We would call them, they were more like hermits. So that's one of our little branches on the tree of consecrated life. They were kind of separating themselves out from everybody else. Again, very early we have St. Anthony, where he's going to live his consecrated life and serve the poor. We talked about charity tonight. consecrated life, all people who took those vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, aka evangelical councils, live in cloisters, monasteries, and cloisters. They separated themselves away from the rest of the world. This is the quick version of consecrated life. Then we have Thomas Aquinas coming, known as the Dominicans. The Carmelites are established. These are all monastic orders. They're not all in cloisters and monasteries today, but in their roots, they're monastic orders. Francis of Assisi founds the Franciscan order. They're not monastic. They're going out to help people. They're men. The girls still have to, they still got to stay in close quarters, as we say. The Jesuits are founded. They were actually the first group that really moved from place to place to place. Like, in other words, Ignatius is here in Spain, and he sends people out to all these other countries all over the place and says, get to work, start spreading the kingdom of God. The first people to just go out there. Francis's brothers stayed near him. They stayed near him. But Ignatius said, we're going out all over the place. First group to do that. The Council of Trent, remember we have the Second Vatican Council that happened just about 50 years ago, but the Council of Trent happened in the 1500s. And it was telling these orders, okay, have a renewal. Can you believe in the 1500s we needed a renewal? We did. 1633, St. Vincent de Paul. St. Vincent de Paul is the founder of the Daughters of Charity. St. Vincent de Paul and St. Louisa Mariac. And Elizabeth Ann Seton is our American founders. I didn't make up this presentation, by the way. You can find this timeline on the National Religious Vocation Conference website. The first community, the Daughters of Charity, remember we used to have the white, we were the flying nuns? We stopped wearing that when we started to dry. Many fender benders before they said, we should change that hat. I say that because it wasn't a rejection of that beautiful symbol. It was making us unable to serve the poor. And anytime we make a change in my community, it has to do with whether or not it's helping us serve the poor. So we were the first community founded that was not in a cloister. And here's where consecrated life gets crazy. Because we have hermits already. We've already had consecrated virgins and widows. That was sort of those early women in the church. They were consecrated widows and virgins, but they were living as hermits. We have religious life. We have the Dominicans, the Carmelites, right? The Jesuits. We have that here happening. And then you have these crazy people show up over here. Actually, Societies of Apostolic Life should really be here in the timeline. My community is the Society of Apostolic Life. We're not religious. We're consecrated. We're a member of consecrated life, but not religious. Because when communities, remember all the women were in cloisters? St. Vincent says you have to go help people. How are you going to help people if you're in a cloister? So he found a loophole. Isn't that a great word, a loophole? The loophole was that we would never take final vows. So the Daughters of Charity to this day, in 2015, we're 17,000 Daughters of Charity, the largest community of women in the world, and not a single one of us takes final vows. We make our vows every single year on the Feast of the Annunciation, and if we don't, they expire. Every November, we go and we ask our superior. We have a discussion. We say, I would like to renew my vows, and she says, she has a nice spiritual discussion with us, and then she sends it to Rome, and they approve our vows every single year. So think about on the Feast of the Annunciation, 17,000 women saying yes again. And it's we have to sign a paper every year. Today we wouldn't have to do that. You know many communities that take final vows. And they're out and active. But in 1633 we had to do that. It was the only way to keep us from going into the cloister. I think I just went the wrong way. These pictures are doing. Oh, there's more pictures. Okay. We're coming to the end of our little talk here about the history. 1947, the Pope Pius XII says, let's have secular institutes. That's right here, right? That's another way of living consecrated life. These are people, the word gives it away. They live in the world. They won't wear a distinguishable sign like I'm wearing. They would dress like you. They take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They do take final vows. Not all, some of them take annual vows like we do. Some take final vows. And their vows are as binding as our vows. Like if I were to leave tomorrow, and it's not March 25th yet, so my vows haven't expired, I have to be dispensed from the Pope. Well, so do all of these people in all these branches. We're all bound by those vows. Just like if you got married, you'd have to go through a divorce and annulment, right? You have to, the church has to recognize that separation. They have to recognize our separations too. So that's what secular institutes are. We have about 5 active secular institutes here in the United States. So if you're ever interested, let me know. In 1950 to 65, a bunch of people became nuns. A lot of people became priests, especially in Ireland. And those Irish priests went all over the place. Remember that? Like, there's Irish priests everywhere. Today, at least I know in the Daughters of Charity, we haven't had a vocation over 25 years in Ireland. That funky thing that happened in the world, really all over the world, from 1950 to 1965, came back to normal in about the 80s. So the number of vocations that are in tune today are actually more normal historically. It's not that, it's so sad that all these people stopped. That was a weird aberration that happened in 1950, 1965. The Second Vatican Council happens. Communities are asked to go through another renewal. Remember the last time was 1500? Long time ago. So much, 400 years later. And not all communities handled it well. So that's what happened in Second Vatican Council. 2013, we have Pope Francis. He says, hey, let's have a year of consecrated life. That's how we got here today. Nothing to worry about that. Okay, that's all I want to say actually, because I think we're going to have a better time if we have a discussion. So, any questions? Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
Name. So for the secular institutes, does the third order belong to that branch, or
So a third order is an extension of generally religious life. It's an extension, it's a family of that. In general, there may be some exceptions, but in general, third orders are an extension, like if you're third order Franciscan, you're an extension of that family of Franciscans which really belong under religious life. And even the promises you make are still kind of within the context of their life. So a secular institute is its own community. It would be a separate community altogether. Does that make sense? Do you, like when you say third order, like third order what? Yeah. So that's an extension of that religious life family of the Franciscans. If this is the Franciscans, there's, all these lines are kind of tethered to the Franciscans. Yes.
So what's an example of secular?
Here in, I almost forgot what state we're in California. I travel a lot. We have the Father Kobe missionaries here, Our Lady of the Way. Those are all secular institutes. And the Father Kobe missionaries have men and women. There's another one called, I'm going to get it wrong, Veritatis something, and that's international. Well, so the Father Kobe missionaries, international. But they have a lot of members here in the United States, and that's a co-ed group. Yep. You could just, if you typed in, if you Googled secular institutes, a bunch. Well, not a bunch, because there aren't a bunch in the world, but they would come up.
They're not as, I would say, as popular as
Well, they're not as recognized.
That's right.
Right. So we don't know when we're talking to somebody necessarily. Yes.
they live in the world, but also in the community?
They can choose. Their community can choose how that happens.
And they do their regular jobs?
That's right. That's So they wouldn't, like for a daughter charity, if I was a teacher, I would teach in one of our schools. But they could teach in any school and still be connected to a community. They could live on their own. It's a possibility for people who have commitments to family members, because you can still live with your mom, take care of your mom, and be a member of a secular institute, take those vows. You know, it's so great. The church has a way for everybody, right? The church has a way for everybody. Secular institutes is a recognized, legitimate way of consecrated life in the church. Any other questions, thoughts, things that are bothering you? Those consecrated people, they bug me.
Are you officially a nun?
No, actually, you probably have not met a nun unless you've actually gone to a cloister to meet a sister there. Very few sisters are nuns. Nuns are cloistered. If you've met a nun, it's because you went to a cloister to meet her. The sisters that you see out on the world, none of us are called nuns. It's a word that we use because we're familiar with it. Like we think, so all nuns are sisters, but not all sisters are nuns. So if you see Franciscan sisters running around, they're not nuns. Mercy sisters, those are not nuns. It's just a term that people recognize meaning a sister, right? So we say flying nun, but we were never nuns. But if you see sisters running around out in the world, they're not nuns. Nuns are cloistered, just like monks are cloistered. So not all priests and brothers are monks, but we seem to know that more easily than we know that about the sisters, right? Very few sisters are nuns. The Carmelites, you know, here in San Francisco, those are nuns. Port Clares are nuns. I'm trying to think if any others come to my head immediately. Yeah, Carmelite nuns, Port Clare nuns.
How about Order of St. Benedict?
Hmm?
Order of St. Benedict? Are they nuns?
You know, they were nuns, and so traditionally, because they're monastic, the Benedictines are probably still called nuns, but they would be active nuns. Probably don't call themselves nuns anymore, because nun refers to the bars, cloister. That's a really good question. Yes.
Are Dominicans nuns?
Historically, yes, but most of the ones you see today, no. And they were also historically monks. The men were, but today they don't live as monks and nuns anymore. They still have cloisters. Like there's a Dominican cloister of sisters in Redwood City, or no, Menlo Park. Those are nuns, but the ones who teach at ICA, not nuns, but they're both Dominicans. I know. Don't worry about it. Just say none. It's okay. We all get it.
No, I confused.
It's okay. That's the beauty of the church and consecrated life. That there's a place for anybody who's called.
But there are societies where the vows are perfect.
Yeah, most are. All religious life, everybody who's in that branch takes perpetual vows. That's right. And for us, even though we take annual vows forever, like we say that our vows are annual, but our vocation is for life. You know, we don't have women leaving every March 25th. Like, see ya! We believe our vocation is for life. Pack up your bags. That doesn't happen. But we have, according to canon law, we have the same protections that other communities would have at perpetual vows. We have them at 10 years vocation. So after we've been a sister for 10 years, we have the same responsibility and protections within the church as a person who makes the final vows. Now that's just a bunch of weird complexity in the church world. It matters to us because it means we can't get kicked out very easily, that kind of thing. That's what happens in perpetual vows too. Things like that. You can't sue for money, things like that. A bunch of laws that apply to us at that time. Any other questions? Yes?
How many years you were a sister and how did you hear your call?
I've been a daughter of charity for about 11 and a half years. I entered about 13 and a half years ago. So that's about how long I've known Janine, about 13 and a half years. Yeah. We're old friends. I'm a lot older, but don't rub it in. This is really important to say about how God calls. You already know this because you are prayerful people. But God rarely calls on the phone. He's not into texting. How I wish he was, believe me. But if you're praying, and I mean really praying, not just showing up for prayer. You know the difference between showing up and praying. Those are not the same thing. So if you're really a prayerful person, you're really praying, and you're saying, okay, God, I know what I want, but I'm going to ask you what you want. You know how like our voice gets quieter when we start, what does God want? I have a lot of dreams, but what are your dreams? If you're a prayerful person, a couple things will happen. One is you will start desiring something different. I remember very clearly being at a Carl's Jr. with a bunch of my friends hanging out and just suddenly realizing I was in the wrong place. These are all people who loved me. They were my friends. They were all good, holy people. But I was like, I'm not, this isn't my life. Like, well, of course, nobody's life is hanging out at Carl's Jr., but I hope not. It may look like it, but it's not totally true. But the realization that wasn't it. And I just remember looking at my friends and how much I loved them, and I thought, oh, wow, this is crazy. I didn't know what it meant, but that was sort of the initial tugging. This isn't it. Another thing that happens when we're really praying and we're really asking God to tell us, what his desire is for us, we start to desire things like that. So I started desiring, I wanted to go to Mass every day. Well, that's what sisters and priests and brothers do, right? Not that you couldn't do it. After Vatican II, that became available to everybody, right? That wasn't really true before that. Some places, yes, but in general, that wasn't always true. So I started wanting to go to church all the time. I was like, I love church. I want to be in church all the time. Again, that doesn't mean you're going to be a priest, brother, or sister. But then I started realizing I really first, and this is a significant thing, I first felt called to be single. I could have been a perpetual member of Singles for Christ. I'm not kidding. That was my calling. I was a Catholic school teacher in the inner city of East Los Angeles. I loved being available. I loved that I got to be the one who stayed after school because I didn't have a family to run home to. I loved the availability of being single in my ministry. It was really important to me that people could call me up and, Lisa, can you go to this? Oh yeah, I'll be there. Because I didn't have these other responsibilities, right? So I'm thinking this is life for me. I felt called to it. I really did. I thought I could be a missionary. I thought there were so many things I could do. And where I taught, there were some sisters. They were not Daughters of Charity. The Daughters of Charity were down the street from where I taught. Same street, though. They were Salesian sisters, who I loved a lot. And I started realizing that God was pulling me to take this life that I love, the life of availability, and that I was supposed to do it with others. I wasn't happy, that whole poverty, chastity, obedience stuff. And the Daughters of Charity, we take a fourth vow. Some communities take 4. We take a fourth vow of service of the poor. I was going to be forever in the inner city. Right now I live in Los Altos. That's not the inner city. But my office before this job was on 88th and Main in South Central Los Angeles, overlooking a very crime-ridden quarter.